I would encourage, just in the same vein, I've said this consistently, when we talk about male-female relationships and all of that, if we are really serious about being counter-racist, a major part of that should be before you even have a child, the dialogues about child-rearing practices should begin. Like before you hit the bedroom, before conception, and I've stated consistently, having a 10-year plan. What are the first 10 years of your child's life academically? What are those years going to look like before the child has even been conceived? Like, that's the type of thinking that we should have. That's the type of planning that we should have, as opposed to ending up in situations. There was another 12-year-old, I think it was a non-white child, even though she didn't look black, but a non-white child, 12-year-old female student who got slammed, body slammed, just like what happened with Officer Slam in South Carolina last year, happened again this week, until it gets to those situations, and then trying to come up with something after it's too late and they've already had years of contamination and torture at the hands of mostly white female teachers, race soldiers. Definitely important to have those dialogues before you get to the bedroom. With that, we will transition to workplace racism. I had two people who wrote in situations, and then I will open it up. Folks can share their commentary. We already had people who said they had workplace racism to share. I will give this as just an alert. I've said this consistently for the compensatory call-in. There are lots more people who listen live, not even counting the archives, but they listen live, even though they do not participate. And we've heard that from people who've called in over the last few months who said they've been listening for a while and they're first-time callers. In the future, probably starting next week, I'm just going to go down the line randomly and pick someone, and you should have something workplace racism, because I just do not think it is possible that you can have 40, I mean, literally, we'll have consistently like 50 people just listening on the phone, right? And so you'll hear maybe a smidgen of those folks actually put their hand up and talk, but there's no way you can have 50 black people and only have a small number of people who actually have workplace racism to discuss. If it's not observations, things that they're seeing from other black people on the job or other non-white people, I just do not believe that. So you should be preparing. Even if you don't have a hand up, you should be preparing for things, even if it's reflecting on things that have happened to you in your workplace experiences over your life, even if it's not something that happened this week or this month, but just something that you remember, like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. I was more confused at that time. Now I have a better understanding. I can do better. That is a lesson right there. I'll know what to do next time. I'll know what to say. I'll know what not to say. I'll know what to do. I'll know what not to do. Just things that really stand out as you get a better understanding of racism. So that will be coming, as I said, probably next week. People who wrote in to share. Number one, a person said, I'm a fabrication lead at an aircraft company in Kansas. I have very little contact with my immediate managers, which could be a good thing or sometimes it's a bad thing. This particular time, I needed to speak with him, so I traveled across the street to the office. As I reached his office, I noticed that his door was closed, so I'll continue to travel down the hall to the other offices where he could be located. All of the offices were empty. As I make my way back towards my manager's office, the door opens from the inside. There I stood right outside the office. Inside stood my manager and his boss and a couple other leads for different areas. On the floor, on the tables, on the chairs are more guns than I have ever seen, large and small. The largest one was about 5 feet long, laid out on the floor, wrapped up in a blanket, maybe even larger than that. They all fumbled around a little bit as they were shocked to see me standing there. My manager's boss said, "Hey, we were just coming to see you." And I replied, "Well, I hope not." I asked my questions and then I kept it moving. The next day, I needed another question answered, so I traveled back. This time, the door leading back to the office was locked. Very suspicious to me, to Gus as well. Workplace racism, number 2. Let's see. Workplace racism observation. I've noticed 2 terms, words that racist suspects have consistently used during job interviews, phone and in person, and at different organizations that signaled to me I was no longer a candidate of interest. My gut told me that the interviewer was probably practicing racism, but maybe it could have been that I was not a good fit. Either way, each time either term word was used, I did not move through to the next step in the hiring process. I wanted to know if any of the C.O.W.S listeners noticed any of the two following terms, words, used during job interviews, and if they were offered a job if the terms, words were used. Chat, as in the interview, has now turned into a chat, and energy, as in we are looking for someone with the right energy, in quotes. Those are our two commentaries that were written in Workplace Racism. If people have thoughts on the use of those terms, chat or energy, in the workplace, particularly in the hiring sequence, feel free. If not, if you have your own workplace racism observations you would like to share, proceed.
May I be heard?
Did we get someone who has not participated at all?
Yes, I was trying to catch the other segment, but I'll speak on workplace racism. Greetings to all the callers and the listeners, and as well as you, Gus. I'm in the Florida area, South Florida. I'm a detailer at a car dealership, and I don't know, if you guys are, of course, familiar with car dealerships and everything, but, you have the sales managers, you got the reps, you got people, upstairs or in the back that do the paperwork. You got porters, you got mechanics, and you got the detailers. Well, that's where I'm at. And, they call it entry-level position, but, of course, understanding black people understand that to be, the low spot, the black, where all the people that are low, who they deem low, are placed. So, but needless to say, that's where I work, and it's maybe 1, 2 white guys, but everybody else is black or non-white. So, normal days goes by, whatever. And as I said, most of the people around are black. I'm very unapologetic about my stance, who I am. Constantly listen to Miss Wilson, just and how she explained things, and how she taught me what racism, white supremacy is, and how it works, and what it's seeking to do, where it comes from. So, but anyways, there was an incident where one of our cars was stolen off the lot. So they had their suspects or whatever. They followed the paper trail. So it ended up, one of my fellow workers, detail, his name came up in it. Not necessarily that he was the one that took it or handed the keys to another individual, but his name just came up in it. So it just so happens his cousin works with us as well. And he's been there longer than us, and he assumes to have a managerial position. But the best way I can say it is he is a proxy racist. He does things to be at a certain level with them, to kind of expose us. It always came to mind what Ms. Wilson said as well. Stop snitching for personal gain. Well, a couple days ago, the incident happened, and we were all around talking about it. So he came over, the proxy racist. He came over, and he was like, "Well, I gave information to our supervisors about this individual because I didn't like the way the other day that he spoke about my son. So he had something to say about my son. So I'm going to redeem my son's image in front of you guys, and I'm going to tell on him." So I haven't really said anything to him. I let the rest of the day go by. Needless to say, they fired his cousin. Ended up he had nothing to do with it. So I ended up asking him later on in the day, how do you feel about that? You got somebody close to you fired. You got somebody black fired. You know what I mean? Let's just cut through the chase. You got a black man fired. But he's one of the ones that are always complaining about young black men in the streets killing each other, young black women, they're this, they're that, they're easy, all these other kind of things. And so I asked him, And his reply was, he has to eat. I got to eat. So I asked him, well, what does snitching have to do with you eating and, making more money or keeping his job is what he was saying by eating, keeping his job. So I asked him, what does that have to do with keeping your job? His response was, I have to be in good with the supervisors, which are all white, by the way. I have to be in good with the supervisors, so I have to keep an eye on you guys because that's what they like. So I left it at that. One other thing I had to mention, the guy is my brother-in-law because I'm married to his sister. So it's like a web. But so I walked away from that, and I understood everything that happened, understood why he did it. And I just see so many of us are confused in that way, trapped up in we have to keep our jobs, or we have to kind of boost our level, our status up through demeaning others of our race, putting others in our race down, or excluding them completely in order to gain a foot. As Scotty would say, get a butter biscuit. And I see it every day. I live through it. I'm just very, very happy once again to say that you guys have this show and somewhere where I can talk about it. I can get it out. So with that, I'll say thank you to everybody, and I'll mute my line.
For sure. Metaphor there with butter biscuits. I did want to comment if other people, if they have thoughts, maybe suggestions on how you would deal with the situation. Thank you for sharing. It seems like we have a good chunk of listeners in the Florida area. Right on for that. Just for context, with Mr. Or a retired firefighter in Florida bringing up Mr. Fuller's point about not calling white people racists, just having that in the background that was said before, because that's something that I encourage on the program, not calling white people racist unless they identify as such. Is this a non-white person that you're talking about that went back, I guess, and reported to the white supervisors that ended up another white people decided to fire a black employee? Is this a non-white person? Nope. Are you still with us? The caller that just shared in Florida? Not hearing. I'm not sure if you hit your mute button or if he hung up after he finished sharing. It seems, unless I am in error, didn't hear correctly, it seemed like this was a non-white person on the job that went back and, told the white people what happened, and the white people decided to fire the black employee. My position that I have taken, I think it would be best, in the same vein as Dr. Frances Cress Welsing when she encourages no name calling. I encourage not calling or placing any titles on a non-white person that they have not identified with. Meaning, if that non-white person has not said, I am a proxy racist, quote unquote, I do not call them a proxy racist. I do not make up any titles to place on a non-white person if they do not identify as such. And I even take that position for the term victim of racism. And I have had non-white people live on this program who have said, I'm not a victim of racism. I do not call them a victim of racism anymore if they do not identify in that way, just in the same thinking, the same logic as not name calling. And I would say that particularly with proxy racists, because I know how we have been victimized in the system of white supremacy, where, again, Dr. Welsing, where she talks about our reflex a lot of time with our frustration with other victims of racism and how we respond to being terrorized is to get upset or to get frustrated with other victims. And the tendency for name calling other victims of racism, I can already see where that type of branding people would go, using that sort of labeling as this person is a proxy racist. In my view, it would be best, this is a victim of racism. The behavior is not constructive in terms of this is not the best way in terms of handling these types of problems. Yes, I think we would all like to see more constructive behavior in dealing with this, but I've just concluded this is what you can expect under the system of white supremacy. That's one of the reasons why I say all the time, there's one race. Mr. Fuller talks about this. I think it's extremely important not thinking just because this is a black person that this is someone who has my best interest. in mind. This is not someone who is going to help me out just because they have melanin, not thinking that way, even expecting, because of the power differential. White people, they control whether we have a pay. As I said at the top of the program, the king of black people, the kings and queens of black people, racist man, racist woman, racist child. As long as that's true, those are the types of things that I would expect on a job or any other circumstance. So that would be number one. And even for this program, I would prefer if nobody on this program is labeling any non-white person as a proxy racist for anything that they do, just because, in my view, it is very, very close to name calling. In fact, any title, I would prefer if nobody is calling any non-white person, any victim of racism, a title that they have not personally identified themselves, just because I think that's very, very close, if not name calling. In terms of dealing with it, it sounds like that you went to kind of just ask questions. I always say that consistently as well. Questions, great way to go, great way to proceed. Just to ask a question about, how this person felt about seeing this black person lose their job. And he said what he said. We all got to, what have you. I got to keep my job, that sort of thing. It didn't seem like he was really pained about this black person losing their job, which also is not stunning, not surprising to me. That's a part of our victimization and the lack of concern that we have for other victims of racism. Again, I would, at least in my view, and I know it can be difficult to say this, but I would really try to keep in mind the people that are most to blame for this are the white people. That black person is responding to the system of white supremacy in a very predictable way. Just keeping that in mind in terms of watching how frustrated we get with another victim. And I know I've heard Mr. Fuller talk about this as well, in terms of expecting that sort of behavior when you go on the job so that you're not surprised about it, and even developing a counter-racist code for how you're going to deal with that the other non-white people, that they're going to fall, that they're just going to do whatever they need to do to make sure that whites do not fire them, to make sure that they do not get in trouble with white people. And if that means going back and doing some snitching on you, or not helping you, or being mean to you, other black people on the job, that's what it means. And just expecting that up front, not being surprised about it, and remembering the people that are most to blame for that are whites. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. I will stop there. And I could be in error. I know people do not agree with that logic, and that's fine too. If the caller or floor, I think you are with us. If you had anything else you wanted to share on that, or if other people had views or thoughts on that, feel free.
No, I just.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was a caller that called in. I apologize, but I just wanted to add that yeah, thank you, Gus, for those corrections, and that was my he's not. You're right. He's not a proxy racist because he didn't identify himself as that. But that was my terminology. I heard it from, and I felt that he fit that description. But you're right. He didn't call himself that, so I shouldn't call him that. And you're also right about him. He has been a victim. I got a chance to know him a little bit. He's definitely a victim of racism, white supremacy. And I like I said, I thank you for those corrections. And I dropped my earpiece, so I didn't hear if you asked me any questions about what I shared.
I did inquire if this person that you were talking, it sounds pretty obvious now, but I just wanted to make sure that the person you were talking about, who the quote-unquote proxy racist, that this person was indeed a non-white person, but it seems pretty obvious now this was a non-white person.
Yes, he's a black man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. They are just suggestions. I wanted to be clear about that as well, because everyone does not agree with the logic that I'm putting forward, and that's fine too. We all have VGQ, and that's fine. So I don't even call them corrections. They're just suggestions. If anybody, yourself included, anybody says Gus is talking crazy and that doesn't make sense, that's fine too. They're just suggestions. The male caller did you have questions that you wanted to ask as well, sir?
I did not, so if there's any other questions that people want to ask this gentleman, they could definitely go ahead, but I do have a workplace racism.
Any suggestions or questions for our first call in Florida before we move forward? All right. If you think of any as we proceed, feel free to share those as well. The male caller who was going to share, proceed.
Thank you very much. I had to laugh, actually. The opening emails that you read, the word that was suggested, energy, was going to be, actually, I wasn't going to include it in the story that I'm about to tell, but now I see its placement, so I will tell the story including that word. A couple of weeks ago, on the job that I work at a very low level at a Fortune 500 company. Actually, it just merged with another Fortune 500 company, so it's a pretty big company. But I work at a very low level there, manufacturing products which make it incredibly rich. Well, about a month ago, I received notification that they wanted to hire me on. I was a temp. I was a temp for about 6 months, and they wanted to hire me on. I actually called in and spoke to you about this. And in the interview process, actually not in the interview, but in the orientation process, the man who was orientating me actually said that my hire was political, even though he didn't think I caught on to what he was saying, but that's exactly what he told me. So, about a month in, which was a couple of weeks ago, pardon me, I was surprised one day I came into work. I was getting into the station where I was placed, and we were starting to get up and running, and my boss comes waltzing by and says, "I'd like to speak to you. Could you just follow me?" So immediately, I could tell by his body positioning and everything that this was not likely to be good. So I followed him, and he had in tow one of our supervisors, a white woman, who, well, I'll get to that in a moment. We went into an office that was out of the way, and he sat me down. He said, "Well, I'd like to let you know that we here at the company that you work, we are going to do these 30, 60, and 90-day reviews. We do it for everybody, blah, 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 blah. We noticed that you've been having some issues out on the floor with some of the supervisors. We have 4 supervisors. 2 of them are male, 2 of them are female." He specifically said that, as he understood it, I was having issues with how I approached the female supervisors. Both female supervisors are white. One of them is a redhead. The other one is, because there are no metaphors, I will not say what I often say about it. But she is slightly younger than me. Well, actually, she's slightly older than me and worked a long time in the position which I'm in before she became a supervisor. The individual who was there was her, and she's actually an assistant supervisor, not a direct supervisor. My supervisor told me that she felt like, and the other woman supervisor, who was an actual supervisor, felt that I approached and interacted with the white males a lot better than I did the white females. Specifically, they felt that I was very, the wording that he used was very strange. That, not that I was disrespectful, that I didn't take them serious. And that my approach to them was very bombastic, was very loud. And I listened to this, and I didn't know that we were going to have the conversation, but I knew it was going to come up eventually, because the way that the 2 females interacted with me were very, very closed. They were very put off by me, and this was very, anybody could see it. They were very put off by me. So when he got done explaining what he explained, I showcased my mental prowess and recalled, without becoming emotional, how I had attempted originally to extend a hand to this woman who I'd never met before, who I'd never worked with before. When she first was offered the position of supervisor and she took it, I said to her, "Hello, my name is so-and-so. We have never worked together before, but I hear you're rather good at what you do. So, I'm looking forward to working with you." I looked her dead in the eyes in front of this man and said, "What was your response to me?" You said to me in a very non-friendly voice, "I know who you are," and essentially rebuffed what I offered to you. I didn't have time to get into the other supervisor and how she interacted with me, but she did the same thing. Ultimately, when everything was said and done, the male supervisor told me that I'd be brought back in for another 60-day. And he said that they liked my personality, that they didn't mind the loudness of my personality, but not to forget, the company was always in search of people who meshed energetically. They were always looking for people who had a certain, quote, energy. And so, to be aware of that and to realize that not everybody can handle that loudness of a personality. And so I've been kind of running an experiment for the last week. I've been very docile and very quiet. And this woman has been very affectionate, very smiling and what have you in my face, and almost like everything is, we are best friends now. So that's my workplace racism. And very briefly, I was writing in my journal about this, and I happened to be looking through an older journal, trying to see if something like this had happened to me before, and I came across an incident which I had kind of forgotten about. 9 years ago, I was hit by a car walking on the side of the road in the middle of winter, and I was reading through some of my comments from it. And one thing that stood out for me in that, in my rendition of it and in trying to piece together why it happened, how it happened, is I said, for some odd reason, I recall the woman, I think I heard her engine rev up before I was hit, because I was hit in the back, so I didn't see her coming. But I said, why would she, I wrote, why would I must be mistaken, because I heard the engine rev up. And it was very powerful considering the conversation that I had, and what I'm starting to now see with white women. But that'll be all. Thank you very much.
Fascinating. I will hush in case other folks have questions or comments based on what was just shared. I will only say I was reminded the half has never been told when he was detailing when black people that were being tortured under earlier phases of white supremacy, when the terrorist whites would change up the cotton rations all of a sudden, or sometimes it would just be, hey, you haven't done anything wrong, but you're still going to get a beating. And that's just what it is. I was reminded of that section from The Half Has Never Been Told that we wrapped up not that long ago. Anybody have questions or thoughts based on what we just heard?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Thomas Smith in New York again. Interesting, yeah. I've heard the chat part before, but usually when you're like at the job and you've gotten in trouble and you're not getting written up, they want to chat with you, or you kind of know. But energy, that's a new one. To the first caller, if that's your, I think he said it was his brother-in-law who snitched on his own brother. Was that what he said?
Cousin, I believe it was. Cousin.
Oh, cousin. Yeah, see, you have to, that could be your coworker or your supervisor or whatever. Like, ethically, for someone to do that, that should let you know what kind of person that is, black or white. I would avoid that person because they don't have any to me, I'll be the type to try to look my cousin out, not try to get him, and to have that level of right validation where you'll go and tell one another. I've always worked with black people like that, and I've always stayed as far away from them as possible. To the black guy, it sounds to me like they want him to, I'm trying to think of a non-metaphor, but, they want you to conform your personality to be a very pleasant, kind, I would not avoid that woman that's getting you in trouble. If you want to keep the job, I would probably engage in very cordial conversations to let her know I don't have a problem with her. But if your method is going to be to avoid her and to kind of shun her, ignore her, I would start looking for another job that you're going to go back and say that, and they're already putting you on a review, and your review is pretty much what your review is how you engage with that white female. That's what they're pretty much telling you. And either you're going to engage with her the way that they want you to, and you can pretty much see how they want you to engage with her is very kissy, They don't want you to, I would change the way I deal with her if I want to keep my job. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
But those type yes, ma'am. Did you have observations or thoughts on what we just heard?
Yeah, you can go ahead, though. That's okay.
Just quickly, I was going to say definitions with terms. The term energy, I would ask, can you explain exactly what you mean when you say energy? And if you can give details on my quote-unquote energy and what that would look like in the workplace in terms of things that I do, things that I don't do, things that I say, things that I don't say, so that I'll know exactly what you mean and exactly what I should do to make sure that my energy, quote-unquote, is what the company wants so that I can, do the best in my job. And the same thing in terms of if they have any questions about the way that you are, when they say your personality is very loud, same thing. I would ask them if they could explain it, not in an accusatory fashion or what have you, but just, so that you can help me out so that I can do better for my next review and we can all have a great work environment. What exactly do you mean when you say my personality is loud? And give me specific, detailed examples of a quote-unquote loud personality. Does that mean I need to watch my volume? Or what exactly, so that I know what you're talking about? That's the type of thing that I would want very, very detailed when they make those type of vague remarks in something that's supposed to be a workplace performance review. That's all. Lady, did you have comments?
Examples. Basically, what he said was, one, the actual loudness of my voice. He said, now, I know there's a couple of other people here, white people, who have loud voices, so, just try to tamp that down. And I said, okay, I've been doing that, but okay, I'll make sure to do that even more. And then he said not to talk to people when they are behind in work, which I immediately said I do that all the time. So, I've done that. I've looked at people and said, okay, you're obviously backed up, so I'm leaving you be. And then the third one was not to be a social butterfly, so not to go around and, when I'm supposed to be in one location, not to be in other locations, which I've never done. I've never done that. And those, if memory serves me, were the three examples which he gave to me. So he did answer that. I just didn't include it.
See, what they telling you is to go to work and do your job and don't interact with other people. Don't, if you might be a person, I've done it before. I might have cracked a joke, had a couple of people who I was cool with at work that I would talk to. This type of conversation saying, don't do that anymore. I mean, your choice. I mean, I would just, keep my conversation to a lunch break, maybe. Definitely not on the floor at all anymore while putting this stuff together. I mean, they're giving you a warning. They're telling you exactly what you need to do to keep your job pretty much right now. And I would just listen to them if you want to keep your job.
Absolutely. I assessed that immediately, and that's why, like I said, I was running this experiment over the last week. I did notice a couple of individuals, including one non-white individual who I already had suspicions of anyway, so I kind of fed him a little bit of what was said in the review to see what his response would be. And he was trying to actually get me to do things that would contradict what they had suggested that I do to remain employed there. So, over the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of playing a chess game to see, okay, what does all this mean? Where do I fit? How is it going to affect me? So absolutely, I did appreciate that immediately.
No, lady, she had spoke up. She had a comment she wanted to get in. I just wanted to say also, you noticed that if I'm remembering correctly, the white female employee suspected racist, that her conduct changed after you got your review or what have you, and they made these remarks and kind of giving you a warning about your loud personality and all this. I think, too, a lot of times racists, they employ these sorts, it's racist psychological tormenting that they're doing, where it might even be that it's not anything incorrect or wrong about what you're doing. They just like to torture black people in a variety of ways. Like I said, the half has never been told. You didn't do anything wrong, but we're still going to beat you, because that's just what it is. That's just what we are, racist psychopaths. And I think that also could be happening here as well, particularly if you're saying that it seems like now she's more affectionate after you've got this review and kind of a scolding almost about your conduct in the worst place, that could be happening as well. And I think that's something that we should keep in mind, because whites employ that technique a lot on the job. Just be mindful of that also. Lady, did you have comments you were going to share?
Yes, I kind of feel like the white woman just wanted to let you know that she was in charge. Just like, hey, look at me, I'm a supervisor as well, and you need to acknowledge that and understand that. I find that white women have a lot of issues with white men in the workplace as far as power and dominance struggle, and the easiest person for them to go get their frustrations off on would be black persons. So I think that's just kind of what she wanted to do. It doesn't really, I don't even understand what loud personality is. I have relatives, in particular my brother, who is a very loud and doesn't really have too many problems with white women because he dates white women. So I think, he's very social with them. He's attracted to them. And he is an extremely loud person. I could literally put the phone down and be in another room and hear him. No white women ever have these type of issues with him. Very satisfied with him knowing that he gives attention to them. So I think that's what it is. It's just notice me, see me, I'm in charge. So I guess that's what my comment was about this, your so-called loud personality, or to me, you not treating her or interacting and engaging with her the same way you did with Mel. Because if you did, she wouldn't want that. She would not like it or appreciate it. She would say that you were rude and offensive in treating her as a male. So I think it's just, again, psychological warfare, like Gus said.
Hang on one second. I just want to make sure we got in our callers from the Bay Area as well. Bay Area callers, did you all have commentary you wanted to add in as well?
Yes, may I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. Greetings, Gus, and to the rest of the callers. So at my school, I recently just found out that on the second floor there is a transgender bathroom. I think it was made during spring break. So I went into it and I saw that it was smaller than the other ordinary bathrooms, and well, it had 3 places where you can go use the bathroom. One of them was a urinal, and the other 2 were stalls, and there was only 1 sink in there. And I found it very useless because I didn't see any transgender people at my school, but I don't know. They're probably there, but I didn't see them. But I just found it very significant that now they're participating in many genders, including transgender. I just didn't. I never noticed that at the transgender thing at my school, but it's only on the 2nd floor, but not on the 3rd. So there might be middle schoolers because it's both a middle and high school. So there might be middle schoolers that are transgender since it's down there, but I don't think it will last that long. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Oh, you're in California. I mean, I said it at the beginning, but for people who don't know, Bay Area, California, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, that area. I suspect out there it's going to last because Governor Brown passed that law, I think it was 2013, and they made it mandatory that all of the schools in the state of California, they have to have quote unquote, I think it's called the Transgender Students' Rights Bill, where they, are supposed to be able to have bathroom access. They can play on the sports teams and all that. And everyone thought this was the greatest thing in the history of ever. And they passed it. I think it was specific for like L.A. or one city at first, and then it was the whole state of California at the beginning of the next year. So I think it's been in effect for a couple of years now. But I suspect that'll probably be a lasting thing in California and probably spreading to other areas, is my suspicion with those transgender bathrooms. That's another thing I've been telling parents that you should, make sure you're having conversations with your children about this because I suspect racists will be ramping things up dramatically on this whole the sexual confusion and all of that. And you're even the past 2 weeks, it's been a lot of that with these bills that have been passed in North Carolina and Mississippi and Georgia. Is going to be a lot more of that. So I suspect that there will be more of that to come, and definitely something you should be discussing with your offspring, particularly if they're in a school system where they have this sort of thing.
Can I make a comment on that, please?
Yes, sir.
Oh, man. I couldn't imagine, man. Transgender bathrooms, man. Man, my last job, I cleaned the bathrooms, man. I couldn't imagine the disgust in that one. The transgender thing is here to stay. I mean, the ultimate goal that they're going for is just to have one bathroom. Everyone just use one bathroom. That's how they think, And it's here to stay. They're gonna have the trans NBA soon. I mean, it's gonna be off the chain. The metaphor. It's gonna be crazy. The metaphor. It's not gonna be good. And I would just, what I don't know if I would be curious enough to go in the trans bathroom in high school, man. That was a bold one, and I'm curious. Do they have like the tampon machines in there? That's my question.
I didn't see any tampon machines, but I think it's just like any other ordinary bathroom. It's just smaller. But yeah, I didn't see any tampon machines.
Right on. Did our other caller in the Bay Area, did you have a comment you wanted to get in, or are you just listening? Assume they are just listening in. Before I'll take one last comment before we wrap things up, so we don't do extra overtime and all that. The caller is 6361. Did you have workplace racism comments you wanted to get in before we wrap things up?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. This is Ken Steele from Chicago. I wanted to say a couple of things. One, regarding the trans bathrooms, I think that that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And I don't want to. I guess we got to not use metaphors, but the transgender bathrooms, I think, are the least of the problems and confusion going to be caused by this transgenderism. Transgender bathrooms, I've seen as kind of a luxury. It's kind of like an upgraded handicap stall. It's just kind of more space to do your business in a personal space. So I don't really have a issue with them, and I actually like when they're an option as opposed to going into a crowded men's bathroom. So that's pretty cool. But regarding the brother that's dealing with the workplace reviews, I would suggest to him that he update his LinkedIn profile. From my experience, anytime white coworkers are bringing you in for non-necessary reviews, they are just building a case against you. So they probably have a 90-day plan to see you terminated. I would preempt all of that by updating my LinkedIn page and actively looking for a new place to hang my hat for at least a little while. You can use this opportunity to get an upgrade in salary if possible, but it's just always easier finding new work while you still have work. So I would give him that suggestion, and I would just understand that they're not playing games with you, and you shouldn't play games with them. Oh, and also, if possible, document every single instance of confusing behavior, incorrect behavior that you're seeing from your coworkers. Document them, even if it's as simple as making a note on your phone. And in certain cases, I have friends that have done this and that have been successful at this. You can bring suit against your employer using the EEOC. He recently got a settlement for over 6 figures using this, and he was able to do this by documenting every single thing that happened, reporting the situation to the EEOC. They made it so that he couldn't be fired while they were performing their investigation for fear of retaliation. And then he was able to move forward with his suit once they found grounds that there may have been some discrimination that took place. He was working for a hospital, so they kind of had deep pockets set up for this sort of thing, and he was able to cash out. And he's done this twice. So it is possible, but at the same time, yeah, they're not playing games with you, and they have their plans, so you make yours.
Absolutely. Hang your hat is a metaphor, but absolutely, I would definitely encourage that. No apologies needed. But yeah, I would definitely encourage keeping the for everybody really, keep your resume up to date. And particularly if you start to see anything that might suggest that, they might be looking to terminate your employment at some point soon, definitely, take that seriously and be proactive. I think Ross had talked about that as well, and seeing some of those signs on his job and being proactive to go out and look for other means of employment so that you can, as best you can, minimize having major dislocations where it disrupts your flow of income and other things, other responsibilities that you might have. But just understanding that that's something that racists, they are going to do. That is a major part of the plan, to just keep us in that constant state of turmoil, which really goes black mental health, where you don't know, you don't have any security, and that disrupts so many things. If you're in an attempted marriage, even if you are single, as they call it, it's still such a massive disruption. And even for a lot of people, even if you are in a position where you have a few coins saved up. I think we had a female caller 2 weeks ago where she was calling in from the New York area, where she had money saved up, so it wasn't like she was going to be in financial crisis around her job, but just the whole stress and strain of when they can mess up your career opportunities and your employment, and have you in a state of self-doubt about your employment, about your competence, about your performance. All of that has a big impact on us. So just, I think, at least in my view, just having a better understanding that a lot of this is by design in order to practice racism and the effects that it has on us in all areas of people activity, understanding that, and then having some strategies in place to try to manage that as best you can. Other employment opportunities, I would again stress having a journal, and I think at least I'm getting the impression that some of our listeners either have been writing or they have started writing about their workplace experiences, and it has been beneficial for them to process and get a better understanding of things that have been happening to them. You can reflect your memory. None of us, our memory is not as good as we think. You forget little details and what have you, and it might be something that was said in January ends up being relevant to something that happened in August. And I think a lot of people, they can attest to that has happened, and you do not want to rely on your memory to have all the details about what this person said, what that person said, what the time was, and just all the specifics about the incident. So I cannot recommend that enough. And you don't have to take an hour. It doesn't have to be a laborious task, a laborious task. You can take 5-10 minutes and just jot down your observations, things that happened, thoughts, feelings, or what have you. Just if you could dedicate maybe 3-4 days a week to start out, maybe 2-3 days, and just take 5 to 10 minutes to write down things that you saw, things that you, if you just give me 5 seconds, then if you have a quick, concise comment before we wrap up, I'll allow you to get that in also, sir. But just if you just make it a 2-3 day a week thing at the beginning, like I said, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, you write down whatever happened on the job that you think is significant, and then I promise you, if you do it, it will get easier, and you might even look forward to doing it and doing it more frequently and writing a little bit more, particularly if things are happening and it's causing you some stress. I think for a lot of people, it's also a great outlet for stress reduction. Some people have started whole blogs about workplace racism, which I think is phenomenal, and this can be helpful for other people because they can say, oh man, they're doing the same thing to me on the job. I had the same experience. You can come up with different strategies. I'll hush there. Sir, were you going to make a quick, concise statement before we wrap up?
Oh yes. My personal suggestion is to, if you have a smartphone, there's usually some sort of notes app that you can open quickly or have it on your home screen. I simply just have a big long note that says my company name, and then in that note, I quickly jot down whatever was said or whatever happened that kind of that caught my attention, and I write down who said what, or who the subject of the note is, what was said or what transpired, and then I write down a date and a time. And then I found that if you can have specific dates and times associated with even the smallest notes, that increases the validity of the notes should they be required as any sort of evidence or documentation in the future.
Absolutely. Use the technology. And my, I guess, final comment, however you are writing, I would hope it's obvious, but you definitely do not want to be doing this on a work computer or any bit of work technology that people that you work with might have access to, or if you're going to go with actual pen and pad type thing, I would not have it on the job. I would have this be something that's at home, so that people, so that there is zero possibility that any of the folks that you work with could access this and share it, pass it around, that sort of thing. Make sure that you protect yourself at all times. With that, we'll be here tomorrow. Looking forward to getting John Potash on the program. It will be interesting to hear his thoughts on Bill Clinton and his remarks this Thursday in Pennsylvania pertaining to his drug sentencing, with the information he has in his book about Bill Clinton's possible role as governor before he got to the White House, his role as Arkansas governor in the massive influx of cocaine, crack, narcotics during the 1980s that destroyed many black areas in this part of the world. It will be very interesting to hear his thoughts on that, as well as the increasing commentary that's saying, hey, let's legalize everything, LSD, heroin, crystal meth, any and everything, including cannabis. Will be very interesting to hear his perspectives on that. Again, he was on the program in 2009. You can go in the archives and check that. We talked about his book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders, his new book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. It's racism, white supremacy is really the main theme of the book, and how racists have used narcotics and drugs for centuries as a tool to dominate non-white people worldwide, and how he sees this unfolding now 21st century. So definitely looking forward to hearing from Mr. Patash. Again, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks to all the folks who chimed in. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Saturday evening. I will say again, sobriety would be best under conditions of white terrorism. As the weather warms, it's springtime, folks want to be outside. Weather's been beautiful here in Washington State. You do not want to be relaxed, uncodified as you are out frolicking and having a good time. Racists do not take vacations just because the weather has warmed. If anything, they become more active. If you're out and about, you do not want to be intoxicated. You never know when it will be a Daniel Holtzclaw, Darren Wilson, who is pulling you over and ready to terrorize you. You want to be sober, clear thinking, so that you can make the best possible decisions to keep yourself safe and any other non-white people that you might be responsible for. Just keep that in mind. And again, buckle up. Let's make sure that we're doing the simple things that can keep ourselves as safe as possible and minimize contact with race soldiers. I would even add in, I would try to minimize being out late. We talked about that before, but really emphasizing that also as the weather warms up, because I know people like to do that. You can have fun, but I would just be very mindful. It's been my observation, racists, they really make an effort to go after non-white people, particularly black people. Once it's midnight, late at night, oh yeah, got to be suspicious. Can't have Negroes just out and about once the sun goes down. This tends to be pretty typical and worldwide. I would submit, I would make an effort to be very cautious about that. Dr. Cambon talked about that on the program before, and just encouraging, kind of minimizing those behaviors. You really are putting yourself in a position with an increased probability for racists making trouble for you, whether it is in the form of a racist officer or just your typical racist citizen who wants to come out and cause all kinds of trouble. Just keep that in mind, and it might be a good idea to try to minimize being out late if you don't have to be. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of racism. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.